Good morning and greetings to everyone. I thought today we would very briefly consider that very thought provoking and enigmatic teaching of Jesus Christ, wherein he says, "Do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot, turn round, and rend you." Now, first of all, as a student of literature, I'm struck by the amazing beauty and balance of the statement. It is perfect and it cannot be improved upon. Um, let's try and unpack this teaching. Jesus, of course, often uses symbols, and the two outstanding symbols in this statement are pearls and pigs. Pearls and pigs, easy to remember. And Jesus is saying, if you have pearls, and it is up to you to decide if you have pearls, do not cast them before swine. Now, I don't have to say much about pearls, something of great value. In fact, in Eastern thought, pearl symbolized wisdom. Now, what about pigs? A pig, if you have noticed, goes round digging its nose in the muck. A pig's interest is very, very limited. It is limited to the gratification of immediate desires with available means, unmindful of hygiene, um, larger relevance, the needs of others. So pig becomes the symbol of a life that's lived entirely for oneself, number one. Number two, the consequence of living in that fashion, namely, that one's intelligence, imagination, sentiments, everything gets corrupted and everything shrinks into this activity of surviving somehow. You don't expect a pig to be interested in the higher things of the world. You don't expect a pig to think or to have an intellectual discipline. You expect a pig merely to survive. So Jesus is saying that there are people in this world, in fact, they are the majority, who live exactly like the pig. They're not interested in anything. They're not even interested in finding out if something better is available to them. They simply go by habit, whatever they have experienced in the past, and they look only for the same thing. Rotten stuff, good stuff, no problem, no difference. It's all the same. So Jesus is saying, you look, people can actually degenerate to this level. Now, in relation to such people, what are we to do? On the one hand, Jesus emphasizes that we have a great sense of we must have a great extent of responsibility towards our fellow human beings. We should love our neighbor as ourselves. But what if your neighbor is a pig? So, in Jesus, I find a very beautiful blend of idealism and realism. His idealism makes him instruct people to be mindful of others, to treat others exactly as you are. His realism makes him realize that not everybody is like you. There are all kinds of people in this world, And unfortunately, there are people in this world who are not people, they're not human beings. So if you give your wisdom, if you give your pearls to them, how will they treat them? They will treat them exactly as they treat muck. In fact, Jesus would say that they would treat your pearls worse than they treat muck. At least they will eat muck, they'll accept muck. If you give them your pearls, they will first trample them underfoot. Why? Because muck they can eat, pearls they cannot eat. Now, this is something very important to understand. Jesus is here underlining a particular attitude to life, which in more dignified terminology is called utilitarianism. That is to say, you accept things or reject things in terms merely of their utility. Religion, is that useful to me in an immediate, material, selfish sense? Then I accept. So, all the religious establishments are designed in that manner to appeal to this particular base selfish interest. So people go to churches, temples, mosques in order to get what they're used to getting. You give them higher things of life, they get fed up. They'll say, "What is this fellow up to? There's something wrong with his head. His head must be examined." So, what happens when you have an attitude to life which is based entirely on utilitarianism? Accepting things, valuing things only for their practical use. For example, if you have this outlook of utility and utility alone, a pair of chappals may be more valuable to you than a work in philosophy or a collection of beautiful poems, or maybe even a piece by Rembrandt, Michelangelo, Raphael, Titian, or what have you. So, Jesus is saying that you should not sink to this level of living entirely by practical utility. A chapati is of that kind, clothes are of that kind, food is of that kind, drink is of that kind. That's what Jesus says. Do not be anxious about what you will eat, what you will drink, what you will wear. These are all things of utility. It is possible for people to live entirely limited to these obsessions. But when you do that, what happens is you become similar to, like, you become like pigs. And this way of life, without your knowing it, will breed in you a certain annoyance and irritation, impatience, vexation with the higher things of life. And this is something that needs to be understood. Depending on what way of life you maintain, you could develop allergy or resentment towards the higher things of life. You will only look for, like the pig does, only look for that which is of immediate utility. Now, you think of the higher things of life. Almost all of them are not of immediate utility. For example, telling the truth. Why is it that most people refrain from telling the truth they know? Because it's not only that it is of no use to them in the immediate context, it's also that they fear that if they told the truth, they would get into trouble. Think of compassion. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus portrays the priest and the Levite as unwilling to practice compassion. Why? Because, from their point of view, practicing compassion in that context does not make any utilitarian sense. On the other hand, if they had realized or if they had come to the conclusion that by taking care of this wounded man, they would gain something, for example, in terms of publicity, an article or a report comes in the local media saying, look at this priest, he risked his life to attend to the needs of a wounded man. And then, of course, many phone calls will come, and then the priest can start a charity organization, and then foreign funding will come. Then his lifestyle will change. He'll become a celebrity, so on and so forth. Suppose the priest or the Levite had seen such a possibility, they would have definitely stopped and taken care of the wounded man. They would also have ensured that there were cameras clicking all the time so that the evidence can then be shared with the people. So publicity is always driven by profit. So in this particular context, when the priest and the Levite looked at it, there was no usefulness in doing anything to help the man in need. The contrast between the priest and the Samaritan, who was a trader, was that the trader, interestingly enough, was not confined strictly to utility. He did not help the man in terms of its usefulness to him. Rather, he was willing to spend and spend more, spend even what he did not have, because he takes the man to an inn and says, take care of him. And if you spend, here is what I have. If you spend more than this, I will pay to you when I come back, which means that he gave to the innkeeper everything he had. So here is a man who transcends, goes far beyond the narrow approach of utility. I will do only that which is useful to me, which is the attitude of the pig. The pig goes in search of something, not that after finding something he can share it with somebody else. He can make sure that his colony of pigs does not suffer from malnutrition or lack of food. No pig is interested in things like that. A pig exists merely for itself. Now, when you have that kind of attitude, one thing is absolutely certain: how you will behave. You will, without being able to help it, you will feel resentment towards anyone who presents to you something different from your utilitarian attitude. And you are, in fact, likely to think of him as your enemy. I've been a preacher for more than 30 years, as many of my friends know. Whenever and wherever I have shared with people the deeper meanings of the teachings of Jesus Christ, I have always earned enemies, from church authorities to the common believer, because that's not what they want. Either they say very politely, oh, your words have gone far above our heads, meaning we don't want to hear anything. There's a polite way of saying that we don't want this kind of stuff. Talk to us about miracle healing. Talk to us about speaking in tongues. Talk to us about prophecy. Talk to us about children getting big jobs. Talk to us about, our life situation improving and our dreams being fulfilled. That's fine. But don't talk to about the ideals of Jesus Christ, because they make us very uncomfortable. In 1984, the Church of North India launched a program called Leadership Development Program for the Church of North India. The idea was to train heads of institutions. Church of North India at that time had about 1,000 schools and about 10 colleges. So through this program, it was envisaged that all these heads of institutions would be trained, plus promising priests of the diocese could be trained. And the then moderator, Bishop Gorai, identified me as the main resource person. I was at that time 33 years of age. It resulted in a personal tragedy for me. I will not go into that. It ended up in my getting blacklisted. by the church. The idea was to challenge heads of institutions to be better leaders in their context. So I used to go around conducting, orientation programs, consultations, workshops, conferences, hectic time. And invariably, with every group that I interacted, whenever I refer to an ideal of Jesus Christ, for example, preaching the good news to the poor through education, immediately and invariably, the question will come: do you really believe these things are possible? They would say, yes, very nice to hear all this, but they are not practical at all. Utilitarianism. Tell us about practical things. Don't burden us with the idealism of Jesus Christ. And it was this very thing that got me into trouble with the Church of Church of North India. I said, as I told you, I was blacklisted because there is an irreconcilable conflict between idealism and utilitarianism. The utilitarians think of idealists as insufferable, irritants, people who have no idea about how things work in this world, dreamers, and they must be excluded. They're a problem, useless. So you have to pay a price for sharing your pearls with pigs. But Jesus says, and this is the saddest truth of life, even if you're willing to pay the price, and even if you're willing to pay the ultimate price, it will be simply a tragic waste for the reason that it's futile, absolutely futile, says Jesus of Nazareth, to try and change the nature of pigs. So sadly, if human beings have already degenerated to the level of pigs, God help you if you have pearls to share. What happens? What happens when a whole community is dominated by pigs, metaphoric pigs? In one of the books by Carl Jung, the great psychologist, psychoanalysis, the father of modern psychoanalysis, he says it's all right to preach idealism, reason, etc. And then he asks this question: what if you are addressing a lunatic asylum? Then he goes a step further and says, what if you're addressing a mad mob? Pretty much the same thing that Jesus Christ said 2000 years before him. Do not cast your pearls before swine. My dear friends, I share these thoughts with you not to discourage you from doing what is right. I don't share these thoughts with you in order to educate you out of your idealism. I believe that a man dies when he abandons his idealism. I share these thoughts with you just to plead with you to make sure that you do not sink to the level of pigs. Also, to request you to make sure that your dear ones don't, your friends don't, your acquaintances don't, your colleagues don't. Love for humanity, the bottom line of love for humanity, is to do whatever we can to ensure that human beings do not become pigs, because once they do, it's over. There's nothing that you can do about it. All you can do is to defend and protect yourself. So I conclude by quoting the words of Jesus Christ: do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn round and rend you. Perhaps you do not know that nearly half a century of experience is speaking through the words I've shared with you in the name of Christ this morning. And I hope that you will take this in the right spirit. Have a blessed day. Have a blessed week ahead. I hope to share such videos every Sunday. And I hope you will join this journey of reflecting together, forming a fellowship of minds, which is so very needed in our times when there is hardly anything that nourishes our humanity that's available from the environment in which we live. The media suffocates the world with garbage. In fact, the time has come for people to realize that they need to protect themselves from the media. It corrupts, it cripples, it degrades your humanity. And what sort of nourishment for your humanity you'll get from other sources, politics, religion, culture, whatever, you know. So, therefore, I believe that it is a fundamental need today to form such fellowships of mind that can sustain us in our humanity. And it's with that expectation or with that end in view that these thoughts are offered and will continue to be offered. Thank you.